Welcome to the Perfect 100, the podcast for BNI members who want to maximize their membership, deepen their impact, and grow their business through intentional networking. I'm your host, Tammy Zurak, a CliftonStrengths coach, longtime BNI leader, and one of the few members worldwide to maintain a perfect Power of One score. Each week, we'll explore the habits, mindsets, and everyday strategies of BNI members who are turning their membership into momentum. Hello and welcome back to the Perfect 100. I'm excited to talk to Jeff Cowens today, and he is going to fill us in on all the good things that he's doing with BNI. So I'm going to start right in. Jeff, tell us, how long have you been a BNI member and what chapter and seat do you hold in that chapter?
So, as far as BNI goes, I've actually been a member probably for on and off over 20 years, through different chapters, starting in Northern Kentucky and then all the way down here to Memphis. But most recently, I'm in the East Memphis chapter, and I hold the education coordinator seat.
Okay. All right. And tell us, well, I'm going to have you give your best 45 seconds here in just a second, but give me a little bit more on so Jeff is in my chapter. If you've been listening, you know that East Memphis is the chapter that I'm in. So you've been in for, looks like about since February, the beginning of February. So not all too long. How long has it been since you've been in?
It has been before this one, 2023 was the last time I was in BNI.
Okay.
So I
All
basically
right. So
took
a
all of
few years.
24 off. Yep.
Okay. And you were in for how many years-ish before that?
Uh, So that was at the Bartlett chapter, and I was in that one for just about a year, a little over a year. Um, Again, a big break from BNI, so probably 3 or 4 years in between that one and my previous one.
Okay.
And that was down in DeSoto. And then I was in that one for about a year and a half. And prior to that, probably another 7 to 8 years before I was in another BNI up in Kentucky.
Okay. So obviously see the benefit of being in a BNI chapter in
Yep.
between all the things.
Yep, for sure.
But I love that you have, I think that being, I've been in 3 different chapters myself, and I don't think I've talked about that before, but the original chapter that I started in 10 years ago was on the smaller side. And how do I put this? I was seeing the writing on the wall. So
Right.
I ended
Yep.
up leaving. I ended up leaving and going to a different chapter, which I was in a long stretch for that one. That was a really good one in terms of bringing value for a membership. And the first one ended up folding after I left. Not no, like wasn't because I left. It
If
just
you were so
happened that way.
important.
I know, right? I think there were a bunch of us that left, and that was one of the reasons why. And actually, it speaks to culture a little bit, which I haven't talked about that here on the podcast. But the culture, it was a well established. There were a lot of veterans in that chapter, and they kind of had their own way of doing things, and they weren't necessarily the BNI way of doing things.
Right.
And they weren't really embracing the new people. And so it was kind of 2 factions, for lack of a
Right.
better way of putting it. We had the old guard and the new people. And so the new people kind of worked together, and the old people really we didn't intermix, which was clearly a problem. So, it speaks to the BNI works if you work it the way it's supposed to. And, if you want to stay in a good environment, to maybe lean in that direction. All right. So, did you have a thought?
Well, yeah. So I mean, almost similar. Just to give everyone a quick background. When I was in the Northern Kentucky one, I was in my late 20s, and I didn't really resonate with a lot of the people in there. There was a big age gap in the group I happened to be in. It was a 7:30 a.m. that met at a restaurant for breakfast, and but that was my first exposure into BNI. I honestly don't think I got anything out of it. I don't think an order or anything ever came from it, but it was a good experience. And obviously, it was good enough that when I moved down here to Memphis many years later, I saw the value. And so, I joined that one. And as many people in our chapter know, I got kicked out because I missed too many meetings. But that's just also a testament to BNI. It isn't just a fly by night organization. There's rules, and they're there for a reason. And so Bartlett, I actually left because I knew that I wasn't going to have the time to dedicate. And then when I joined this East Memphis one, just because of how my jobs have lined up, I'm finally afforded the time to actually put into BNI. And I tell everyone this on my one-to-ones. I've done more one-to-ones with this chapter than in all of my BNI combined. Yeah, so it's I'm much more involved in this one, and just having the time allows you to really get into it and take the benefit from what the meetings provide.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, and it kind of speaks a little bit to I don't know what the right word is. It's not a vetting, but it could be a vetting thing when we're interviewing new people is we want to make sure that they have that time, right? Is
Yep,
you're not going to be as successful for yourself or anyone else really if you can't put in the time it takes, which can be it's as significant as you want it to be. A
correct.
minimum there has to be a minimum amount, but the more I'm a big believer in the more you put into it, the more you get out of it.
Correct.
So, having the right set of circumstances, sometimes we're just not catching people at a time that makes sense for them and their business. So, we oftentimes I think want to go to let's just fill the seat because there's a new body, but it's detrimental if in your own company you wouldn't hire somebody who couldn't give the time to whatever the role is you're hiring them for, so why would we bring them into BNI? Because it's really the
Correct.
same thing. So cool. All right. So we're going to roll into you giving us your best 45-second weekly presentation. So I am going to hold the timer up so you can see it and go ahead and start. As I'm going to go ahead and click it, and then you can go ahead and start.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Jeff Cowens with Toof American Digital. We are Memphis' largest and oldest commercial print shop in business for over 160 years. We specialize in helping businesses make a bold impression from business cards to backlit channel letters, direct mail to wide format signage. Our team prints, produces, and installs everything in-house with fast turnarounds, and we ship nationwide. Obviously, having FedEx in our backyard is a positive for us. We have until midnight to get something on a plane and still have it delivered the next day for all those last-minute requests. Our clients include national brands like Extra Space Storage, Anheuser-Busch, and Netflix, but we love helping local businesses look just as polished. Again, this is Jeff Cowens with Toof American Digital. Look forward to working with you.
Awesome. Right on time. I love it. And as the bell ringer in our chapter, it's always
That's right.
appreciated when people fill right in on the 45. I hate having to ding people, but we
I
got to
know.
keep that meeting moving. So,
It's
all right,
yeah, it's
go
a
ahead.
it's a needed thing. That's for sure.
Yes. Yeah, because a lot of us can get, windy when I
Yes.
don't know, we have a lot to say. Well, and some people I know in particular, have a particular set of strengths that, like to talk, so we're gonna get to
Yes.
that later,
Yep.
but yeah, so some of us can get into that communication kinda thing later. This is the perfect 100, so, we're gonna for those of you listening that are not watching, I will read this for you. So Jeff has a total of 13 weeks on his Power of One. His total score as of the most recent report is 65, which is 5 points away from green. So he's in the yellow. And then across the board attendance, he's got 20 points in the green. Referrals per week, he's got 15 points in the yellow. Visitors per week, he's got 10 points in the red. One-to-ones, he's got the full 20 points in the green. And then CEUs,
Yeah.
at the zero. And again, these are an average over 6 months. So that's not that there's none, there's just not enough to kind of kick that average up past that
Yep.
gray mark. So let's talk a little bit about that. Which of these things comes most naturally for you that gets measured?
Attendance is one thing, but I would say definitely the one-to-ones. Certainly in this chapter, just being able to sit with people and learn, not only about their business but also just their personal lives, as deep as they want to get with me, anyways. And I've had some deep conversations with a couple people in this chapter, so it's been really good because you can really start to I don't know, once you break through that first barrier, you really start to understand what somebody is looking for in a referral partner. And, obviously, as it goes deeper on my side too, they start to understand more of what I'm looking for in that perfect partner too. So one
Yeah,
to
for
ones for
sure.
sure.
Yeah, and I'm not surprised by that based on your CliftonStrengths results. That would be your answer, because that makes complete sense for who you are, based on what the results were, which we'll talk about later. But how about, what is most challenging for you of the things that get measured?
So I mean, obviously the CEUs, and I don't really know why. I think it's just one of those things of I could easily, just on the treadmill in the morning or whatever, be listening to a podcast. And I had a one of my one-to-ones last week with somebody in our chapter. I was talking about the CEUs, and they brought up like they make Wednesday their BNI day. So on the way to work in the morning, they're listening to podcasts. On the way to the meeting, they're listening to podcasts, and they can kind of guarantee themselves, 1 to 2 CEUs every week just by doing that. So that's kind of the path I need to get on, is just dedicating a little bit of time. I've got a decent drive to work to and from that I could certainly knock out. I end up doing other things, getting on a phone call or whatever, but that's definitely where I can pick it up.
Yeah, and I think that's a challenge for a lot of people, and I think oftentimes it's just because we forget about it, right?
Yeah.
It's you have to be very intentional, and whoever you were talking to that said that's their BNI day, that's a good way to think of it sometimes for it depends on your personality. CEs used to be challenging for me, but I just say, and I kind of do the same thing. Wednesday is BNI day. I'm a chapter success coach for 2 other chapters that meet before ours does. We're a lunch meeting on Wednesday mornings. So I alternate between them and I try to do one-to-ones, and Mondays and Wednesdays, really, I kind of both days I have kind of earmarked for BNI things, Monday
Nice.
mornings through lunch, and then same for Wednesdays. I can do stuff in the afternoon that's not, but I knock out all my BNI stuff as much as possible on those 2 days, which just
Nice.
gets my brain trained towards making sure I hit all the things. And I'm very driven to keep the perfect 100 for many reasons,
Right.
which are
Right.
probably very obvious because this is what the podcast is, right? So getting those 4 hours in, it feels like a lot. But if you're driving, I just listen to it on the way to BNI because I have about a 20-minute drive and back and in
Yeah.
the shower, whatever works. So. All right, and then let's look at
Absolutely.
your PALMS report as well. So, going across, so absences you have none. Referrals given inside 5, referrals given outside 8, referrals received inside 12, referrals received outside 13, and then 2 visitors. And this is so this isn't a full, even though the personal PALMS defaults to 6 months. Jeff hasn't been in the chapter for 6 months, so this is just since February 5th. So that's pretty good. It sounds like you're both giving and receiving, which is amazing. Um, and then visitors to one-to-ones 21, and that is a 13-week measurement. So you're, almost doubled up, which is amazing. And thank you for close business that you've given is 2,500 and CEUs is 3. This episode is brought to you by Tammy Zurak Coaching. Ready to build your strengths, your business, and your brand? Visit tammyzurak.com and click the button to book your free strategy chat. Let's turn your passion into a thriving success. tammyzurak.com. So, talk to me about referrals. Looks like you're both giving and receiving. So,
Yeah.
how have you made those connections already in such a short amount of time?
So, I mean, I guess I kind of have a bonus. I've known some of the people in the chapter for like, years prior to this. So we kind of have, some of us have a working relationship, but it just kind of defaults. It's nice, a lot of people in the chapter with their own businesses have um, maybe haven't even done signage or any kind of, main print, or they've been going to a FedEx, Kinko's, or something like that, where
Yes.
for us, I can I can turn quicker than a FedEx Kinko's, and I can probably be 50% of the price. Because it's what we do all day, every day, versus they have a couple machines in a store where their main focus is shipping and logistics.
Something else, right?
Correct. Um, so I think that's been probably an easy thing, just trying to get some of the small stuff from people. Um, And as I continue again through the one-to-ones and through my 45 seconds every week, really trying to dive down and get a little bit deeper in those so that people understand like who I'm looking for and then why I'm looking for them. Not just a I want this guy because I saw him on LinkedIn or because he does this. It's this guy because he works for this company, but I can also use any other company that's like them. For example, blah 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 blah. So just something to get them, obviously, and I think you know this. We've talked about it. The more specific you can get, the more they're going to listen. And that's why even I've started now, as of last week, my 45-second, and I'm actually starting with just a fun fact because at least it triggers somebody to listen and hear what I'm saying. And hopefully they continue, listening after I give that little fun fact.
Yeah, yeah, and again, that's gonna play to your strengths, which we'll talk about in a second, but the strangely, but I think that, you and again, I have sort of inside knowledge because I get to hear you every week, but you switch it up, you're not asking for the same thing, we've both been in other chapters, so I'm sure, and people listening have probably heard people say the same thing over and over again and
Yeah.
add no specifics. And it's much easier to tune out when somebody doesn't say anything different or unique. And it's easier to light up an opportunity for somebody when they ask for something, whether it's a specific company or a specific person, even because someone in that chapter is connected, that Kevin Bacon game, The 6 Degrees of Separation.
Correct.
Somebody's connected. So if we don't ask for it, we can't receive it. It's weird.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's amazing. Okay. Um, so when you look back at your BNI membership, because you've been in and out for the variety of different ones, how has it being in BNI impacted your business?
So initially, I would say when I was in the DeSoto one, when I first moved down here to Memphis, it definitely helped because I was able to, while that was a chapter similar to what you were describing before, there's a lot of uh, veteran people in there that had been together for a long time. And I was coming in replacing a printer. And so, there's, I forget somebody
Harder,
called it, but like a ghost referral partner.
right?
So people were still kind of using that other printer. And luckily, I could do a lot of things that they couldn't do. So there were things that I could pull out. But here locally, for those that know the businesses, that's where I was able to get Moe's Burritos, their local franchise, and Gateway Tire. And I've held on to them for the past, it's been almost 8 years now.
Nice.
And again, I lost Gateway at one point, but it was because I left another print shop and they stayed with that print shop. And just staying in contact with them though, I 2 weeks ago just picked them back up. I helped them out of a bind and they said, okay, well, we're done with that other company. Now we'll be using you from here on out. And then that all came from a BNI relationship. So
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. So, because I'm sure lots of us, and me included, have had that scenario where we come in behind somebody else.
mhm.
And in my case, I went into a chapter where someone switched seats. So they were still in the chapter.
Oh, jeez. Yeah.
And they were doing the thing that I was coming in to do. I was in my first go round, I was portrait photographer. And I specialized in personal branding. They were doing the same, they were still doing headshots, but they
Crazy.
switched over to do websites and marketing. So, they're referring to that person directly,
Right.
and for the thing I do, and I see it pop up on social media. And I'm like, okay, so I guess I have some work to do, right?
Right.
So, eventually, as chapters grow, people don't have those relationships, right?
Correct.
You're never going to get, and that's the challenge we have in every chapter, right? Is you come into a chapter, you have relationships with other people outside the chapter. So you're immediately, it's not like I'm dropping my relationship with that person for someone I don't know. You
Right.
know, we have to build over time to, do I know, like, and trust this person before I give them my good client or whatever relationship I'm going to move forward to. So it's on us to some degree to establish those relationships. So maybe we can talk more about that when we get to your strengths. Um, And this is not necessarily a BNI question, but what is one mistake that you've made in networking or marketing your business that you learned the most from?
I think it early on was uh, um, pretending I was bigger than I was. So, there's one thing to, project like I can do all of this and like I'm good. You give me something, I will say yes and I'll figure out how to get it done. I do think that's completely acceptable no matter what size you are. But it's, almost getting caught in a lie of, yeah, I'll have, we have this huge team behind us, blah, 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 blah. And not having that and getting into a situation where, oh, okay, you just passed me to someone else on the team. Well, there is nobody else. It's me and one other person. So
Right.
I learned very early on that, yes, you can project bigger than you are. But to be completely honest, I am a team of two, but I have a plethora of vendors and partners that I rely on that can, I have contracts with them, so I get special pricing, et cetera. And
Right.
that's the way that I've learned now to kind of communicate my business.
Okay, so sort of a transparency that
Hmm.
if you there's the fake it till you make it kind of mentality.
Correct. Yes.
I
Yes.
am all things, but it when it comes to your partners and whether it's BNI or not, I think most people can see through or they will find out,
Correct.
if they do work with you and you can't make those things happen, and that's
Right.
worse for you because
Yep.
that bad news spreads faster than the good news does usually.
100%. Yep.
So I love that. Thank you for sharing that. How about your biggest win through BNI?
Well, hopefully it's coming up soon, like this week. But I'm here again. I've been in printing in Memphis for 9 years now, and well, actually, really, I guess close to 11. I have always wanted to get inside of Hollywood Feed,
Okay.
and um, I've had a meeting with the owner probably 10 years ago. Didn't really go anywhere, and I've always felt like I've had like there's one touch connection possible, but just have not been able to break that wall. And through someone in our group, I got connected with their CFO and had a fantastic meeting 2 weeks ago, and we're following up this week to see what we can do. But that it looks like we're going to be able to come in and really be a kind of a one-stop shop for them. Get rid
Nice.
of, I look at it as two ways. One, it's great for them because they can make one phone call and get whatever they need, whether it be a new sign on the outside of their building or circulars for their stores. And they also have one call, one throat to choke if there's a problem. Um, so
Love that.
it's good for both of them really because they don't there's not a blame game that's going to happen. It's going to be my problem no matter what it is. And so that's there's a sense of ease maybe that comes
Right.
with that as well.
So it's I love that I like to think of certain connections as I have this conversation with my husband and other people since I'm a year into coaching. I mean, I've been coaching since 2015, but the seat that I hold in the chapter is a year into coaching, and I like to think of it as you have your big whale, so to speak. All
Yep.
of us in business have the day to day, keeps the lights on, bills paid, kind
Correct.
of business. But we all have that one relationship that we'd love to have that makes us, I don't know what the right word is, stable, for lack of a better way of putting it.
Right.
That
Right.
if we maintain that relationship with that whoever that is, then we have a nice springboard into doing things with more ease.
Correct. Yeah.
So, and that I know because again, I'm in your chapter is that you asked specifically for that connection, and
Hmm.
someone in the chapter, I think again, that 6 degrees of separation had that connection, right?
Correct. Yep.
Being specific was the win comes from you doing the right things on the front end and making those relationships to where they felt comfortable connecting you. So that's amazing. I love that.
Yep.
All
Okay.
right, let's take a turn. We're going to go into your Clifton strengths.
Wow.
So starting from the top, number one is communication, and I'll read you the little blurb. You generally find it easy to put your thoughts into words. You're a good conversationalist and presenter. Number two is woo, which is winning others over. In case you don't know what that is, you love the challenge of meeting new people and winning them over. You derive satisfaction from breaking the ice and making a connection with somebody. Number three is responsibility. You take psychological ownership of what you say you will do. You're committed to stable values such as honesty and loyalty. Number four, positivity. You have contagious enthusiasm. You are upbeat and can get others excited about what they are going to do. And last but not least, includer. And this is a new one because we haven't had an includer on so far. So, includer, you accept others, you show awareness of those who feel left out and make an effort to include them. So, and what surprised you the most?
I have to say I'm not like overly surprised about anything on here. Um, I can think of things for each one of these, positivity. People say I always have a smile on my face, always smiling. And you know, if anything, it would be responsibility, but it's but the description that's on here does make sense when I see that. So I don't know. I don't think it's really, I was a DJ for 18 years, so the communication and the woo definitely makes sense that they were
Right,
one and two,
right,
because that was my job, was to make sure people were having fun, and I had to meet new people all the time. So
right.
Staying ahead in a world driven by technology is key. At Wisdom Integrators, we don't just solve problems, we create opportunities. Wisdom Integrators, connecting your world, solving your problems.
Yeah, and you have two relationship building themes, two influencing themes, and one executing theme in your top five. Now, if you had the rest of them showing, I'm sure there would be some strategic ones, but your main things tend to be building relationships and influencing people. So it's I find that we need all different kinds of people to do all different kinds of things. And speaking to that, I pulled and you're not going to be able to see this. And if you're listening, clearly you're not going to be able to see it. And I didn't print it or have it to show on this slide, but I was doing this morning. So this is a team grid. So this is our chapter because so many of the folks in my chapter have embraced understanding what their strengths are. They have taken the assessment, and we have several people and people that have already been on the podcast. So you have some friends in communication and woo both that have already been on the
nice.
podcast. So we have three people that have been on the podcast that have woo. No better thing than in a BNI chapter to have people that want to win others over.
Yeah, right, right.
I mean, right? It's kind of the right thing. And communication, also a good thing, I think, for, making those relationships happen. And then you also have obviously relationship building. You've got several of those. So, and includer's a new one for the folks that have listened to the ones previously. I love includers because they, well, let me ask you this question. Are you a big party? Do you like to throw parties? I mean, you just said you're a DJ, but do you enjoy throwing parties?
Um, yes, I can say that I don't throw a lot of parties, but I do like having people get together and
Okay.
come. Yes.
And when you think about getting people together, is it who's driving that? I know you have a family, so is it
Yeah.
you kind of saying, we should get together with these people, or what does that look like at your house?
I would say my wife actually probably makes most of the plans.
Okay.
So she's kind of deciding who we're going to hang out with.
Okay.
But just quick story, we just went to a bat mitzvah on Saturday night, and all the kind of kids left at 9 o'clock, and there were some adults just left over, and we had a DJ for an hour, and so obviously they were playing our music, and we were having a great time. And at the end of the night, we're like, we need to do this and just get like a bunch of couples together. And it doesn't matter if I may not be friends with this couple or that couple, but just get a bunch of people together and hire a DJ, get some food and some drinks, and rent out a place and just have a great time. And so, it's something like that would be fun.
Yeah. So usually includers are people that see people sort of on the fringe and bring them in, right?
Yeah.
They recognize that they don't want to leave anybody out. So, if there's somebody not having a good time, or if you're going to get people together, maybe you're adding to the list. And I don't know if that holds true for you in your life, but where it plays out well, I think, for BNI is when you have a room full of people, this is the grid. And I know the people listening and probably the people watching can't see it, but there is a nice blend of different things. We have people with different talents across the different region areas of themes that we want, because you need a well-rounded group of people in order to appeal to everyone, right? And you have a particular set of talents that generally lend themselves well to, maybe being an ELT, somebody who, is going to be engaging when they're standing in front of the room, or you said your education coordinator, we enjoy listening to somebody who thinks about how they're going to hit all the points and not be boring and have a positive outlook and include everybody. Or maybe you look at when people are visiting, what happens when some new person walks in the room for you that's visiting?
It's always important for me to go and see that person, but I try to give them their space too. I've been that new person at a BNI group, and it can almost be a little overwhelming having everyone kind of just come up to you and introduce
Right,
themselves. So I may let them get through the first few people, and when I see that, they've been with somebody for an extended period of time, it's 15 minutes, but
right,
then I'll go up and just introduce myself, and maybe not even get into a full conversation, but at least say, "Hey, nice to meet you. I'm Jeff. I'm glad you came to the meeting," and then that'll be done. So yeah, and even to this, I think it's a lot. My past, my work history, everything feeds directly into these top five. And in school, at one point, I was a middle school education teacher. So I did like 2.5 years or a year and a half or so of education. I was a student teacher and all of that. So I've always wanted to just bring in everybody. I've never had an issue of, you know, I really never want to leave anyone on the outside. So the includer is I guess that would be my surprising thing, is that that actually isn't higher on the
okay,
list.
okay.
Um, but yeah.
Well, and you may be in a different season too, right? If your audience is a group of, what age were they that you were teaching?
It was middle school, so fifth grade, sixth grade.
Okay, so fifth or sixth graders, you probably have to make more of an effort to make sure, because there's going to be more fringe people
Yes.
than adults. Although maybe not, because I feel like there are a lot of fringe people in the adult. And I have a hard time sometimes because I am leading the way. That's my personality. I have to stop myself sometimes and go back and ask, are we?
Yes.
Or if I see somebody not talking, and I have to be intentional, because it may not be my first thing, because it's not necessarily my top strength. So I have to look around and make sure everybody is, getting what they need. Or I have somebody who has that natural talent, and I just put them on that and say, can you make sure that because that's your thing, right? So, and that's the benefit of having a nice big team.
It would make sense that I'm in our growth category at the chapter, right? So
Right. Yes, for sure. So if you had to lean into one of those more to grow your business, or, be better in BNI, what do you think you might want to lean more into?
if I was gonna, go into one of these, it's probably the responsibility, and just make sure that I can maintain, what I am promising people when I'm meeting with them, and what I'm putting forward as, yes, we can do that, making sure that we can do it and I stick to it.
Right.
Um, but I would even say, having some strategic thinking. I mean, my wife, again, is like the strategic thinker in our family, that's for sure. She is very detail oriented, and that has always been a weakness of mine. So again, understandable why that is more so not in my top five, but
Yeah.
for
And that's
sure.
that's probably not that uncommon that a partner has something that you don't have,
Hmm.
because we tend to balance each other out. Oftentimes we look for partners that can kind of give us, if we were exactly the same, it would be crazy.
Yes.
Right? Like, we wouldn't get
Yep.
anything done depending on what your skills are, or what your strengths
Right.
are rather. You'd be missing out on some things. I feel like we always tend to find someone that has some unique things that we don't have. Um,
Yep.
all right. So, what one piece of advice would you give to somebody who wants to build a stronger referral-based business, whether it's in BNI or not?
It's really practicing on those relationships. And again, I've had so many jobs I can pull from so much. Even going back to when I worked at Best Buy, and I specifically remember one of their trainings, bringing on new employees, was how to engage people in conversation. So I remember the video that they showed us and everything. The guy standing at the stereo wall for car stereos, and he had a sweatshirt on that had a school on it. And so when the salesperson came up to them, they were like, "Oh, if you're a fan of I'm blah blah blah, I'm a fan
Right.
of the Bills too." And you start that conversation and just instantly make them comfortable when you're not talking about actual sales and which one are you interested in, and just letting them talk about themselves.
Right. Yeah, that's amazing. Coming from a long background in sales, that comes. Feel like that's the icebreakers, or the part that a lot of people miss. Because they wanted
Yes.
to sell the thing, but you've
Right.
got to make a connection with somebody before you can sell the thing.
Yep. Yep.
How about from a referral partner standpoint? What advice would you give somebody who wants to build a stronger referral network?
Um, I would I would say again, just in BNI in general, is using BNI. You're a member in your group, and that's great, but there are probably 10 plus other BNI groups in your city,
Yes.
that you could go to, that may or may not have what your position is or what your role is. And utilizing that. If you have the time to go and visit more chapters, it'll come back. I mean, I've gotten a referral from somebody in Pittsburgh because they were looking for someone who was coming to Memphis
Right.
and needed a printer. And I was the one that happened to show up for them, and from my gains report and all that. So
Yeah. Well, and that's a big thing too, right? Is we have a worldwide network. There are more than 300,000 people in BNI. So if you can do business like you and I both can do outside of just our local area, you can make those connections anywhere. But that comes sometimes to you without you knowing it's coming, because they look you up in the BNI system, and they decide they might do some more investigating, right? Is what is
right.
your they have access They might have access to look at your Power of One. They might have access to look at what you've posted in various places. So if you want to, I teach branding, and if you want to have the most opportunity, you have to kind of think about your brand holistically, whether it's just in BNI or outside of BNI. It's really easy to figure out what people are up to today. Easier than
Exactly.
it's ever been.
Yep. No kidding.
They might go look you up on LinkedIn or whatever to see what are you all about. And so, having the ability. But the cool thing about BNI, I think, is we've bridged the gap of the cold referral, right? Is we can do business with anybody anywhere. We have the opportunity. There are weekly calls on, I'm trying to lost what it's called, but where we can connect with people in other areas,
Oh yeah.
and the network speed networking, and so you can go and meet other people, so you can widen the net as far as you like if you can do business or want to. But people will kind of find you to do business with you locally too. There's tons of
Yep.
stories about that, so that's very cool. All right, so what do you want to grow next, whether it's personally, professionally? How do you want to show up? How you want to show up in the business community? What are you trying to grow? What's new for you?
Um, Man, that's a tough one. I guess really just like just locally, just trying to grow the presence of Toof where I am now. like I said earlier, we're the oldest commercial print shop in Memphis, and most people don't even know who we are. And it's a lack of marketing, but it's also just it's complacency as well of having the same people in the same position for year after year after year. They're comfortable, the salespeople, some of them are comfortable in what they've built and don't need to go out and get more. And I'm hungry. So I'm going out and I'm kind of preaching the good word of what Toof is, and trying to bring as many people into the fold as possible. It's like you said earlier, you've got your nut that you need to get, you make sure that you have that, that'll pay your bills. And I'm working on getting this gravy is what I really try to do. So
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. And I know when in the chapter when Jeff says toof, it's like what? What did he say?
right.
It's TOOF for if you're
Yep.
trying to make out what that word is. And we'll have links in the info everywhere, so you can connect with Jeff if you want to and figure out what the name of his business is. Toof like your teeth, but not your tooth. Yeah,
Right.
something like
Yeah.
that. All right. So
Toof.com is actually a toothbrush company, which is
oh,
crazy.
that's hilarious.
So
Well, I know that like I watch a lot of dog stuff because I'm a
mhm.
dog crazy lady, and they often refer to your teeth.
Oh, right.
The dogs have
Yes.
their
Yeah.
teeth. So yeah, there's poops, teeth. I don't know, whatever. All right. So what is the most impactful thing for you that we talked about today that you think you'll take into things you want to do with either BNI or in your business later?
Um, I think probably looking at the Clifton strengths and seeing that I lack the strategic thinking. I know it's there, and it may just not come out in that kind of report. But yeah, I even started it this morning, and it wasn't because of that, but it's okay. My fiscal calendar technically for personally starts over in August and on the sales side. And so when I look at what I've done so far in the last 10 months, I was looking at all my sales and who I brought on, who I expect to grow and who I expect to continue on the way they are. And I guess at least in my mind, that is strategic thinking because I'm trying to look at where do I need to focus going into my next year, as far as my numbers go and who I'm talking to. So but that's the biggest thing. I think the strategic thinking and being able to put a little bit more data behind my feelings
Okay.
is always good.
Your feelings. All right. Well, and
Yeah.
I will say to you that so you only have your top five, and
Right.
there are 34 strengths. And you may find that right behind the five that you see are a whole bunch of strategic ones.
Yeah.
So you can unlock the rest and get what those are. And that's what I do in coaching is, people want to focus when I do a coaching session, they want to focus on the top ones and the bottom ones, and
Right.
the bottom ones are they want to hyper focus on what they feel like they're not good at, which is what you just said, right? Is I think I'm strategic, but I'm not seeing that, so I must not be good at that. Overall, you didn't say it
Right.
exactly like that, but that's a thought, right? Somebody's going to have that thought. And when you rank order sort of from top to bottom, it's not that your bottom ones things you can't do. It's just that's not your go-to. So, you tend to be you don't even think about communication. It just happens. You don't think about influencing others, woo, all those things. It's just part of who you are.
Yeah.
You don't think about I need to make sure I wrap my arms around everyone because you're already doing it. It's just natural for you. It's the other stuff, looking at the chapter, we don't have anybody that has context in so far that's taken this in the
Wow.
top
It's
10.
crazy.
I've only sorted it by some of the folks have only taken the top 5. Context is looking back. We have a number of people that are futuristic, and I'm trying to find the number here. I know there's at least 2 or 3 of us that have futuristic that's looking forward.
Got it.
And so what happens when you don't look backward sometimes? What do you
Yeah.
think
Like
happens?
you got to repeat the same mistakes and never move
Exactly.
forward.
Yes, that's that old saying, right? Is you're
Yeah.
doomed to repeat the past if you don't, understand what has already happened. So you need
Yeah.
somebody it's a nice blend when you have futuristic and context, because you've got somebody going, we already did that and here was the result. Or this somebody else did that, or let me go look and see what's happened, because without that context, you might not be going forward in the right direction. And they can give you a balance of things that you didn't consider. And, I have high ideation, and I'm just popping off ideas, and they're like, nope, did that. Nope, did that. Right. But they don't have to say it like that. But,
Right.
it's nice to have that, whoever you may not be great at, and I'm definitely not, context is not one of my high ones, but having somebody on my team that is helpful. So, don't look at it when you unlock the rest. I think you'll be surprised if you go that direction. And as a coach, then all that planning that you were talking about, that's what I do for people, is help them look at, okay, what are we trying to do next, and how can we maximize that with what you already do well? So there's that. Well, thank you, Jeff, for joining us today. It was great
My
having you
pleasure.
here. All
Yeah, it
right.
was good.
And thank you for all the listeners for being here with us on the Perfect 100. And we look forward to seeing you, or I guess you're hearing us and seeing us next time. All right. Have a good rest of your week if you're listening, and keep that network growing. Thanks for listening to The Perfect 100. If today's episode sparked a new idea or inspired you to show up differently in your chapter, share it with your team, and be sure to subscribe so you never miss a conversation. And if you're curious about your own Clifton strengths and how to bring out the best in yourself or your chapter or your business, head to tammyzurak.com to learn more about building your superpowers into everything you do. Keep showing up, keep connecting, and keep building your Perfect 100.